morning. This week we are talking about history of music and films, and today in particular we're talking about silent films. So we're going to go back to the very beginning of film and look at what music added to film and why it's so important today. So behind every great film and television show is a brilliant soundtrack that makes the finished product spectacular and iconic. The soundtrack music has a fundamental place in film and television. It creates the tension, instructs the audience how to feel, and it produces memorable moments that last forever. But how did it gain its place in history? So nobody is going to contradict you if you tell them that the soundtrack is important in a certain movie, because everybody, I think deep down, everybody knows that the music in the movie is important. But how did it come to be that way? Because when film was first started, there was no sound whatsoever. There was no dialogue. You couldn't hear the actors interact with each other. All you could do was see their lips moving. There was no sound at all on the film. Everything that you heard had to come from the cinema where you were actually watching it. There was no such thing as like a recording that was played with the movie. So today we're going to talk about silent movies and how music started with the silent films. So film music was largely live in the silent cinema. Like I said, the sounds were not on the film, so they had to be produced live. So because everything was produced live, music practices were specific to whatever culture and nation the film was being viewed in. So films could be like the actual film was the same for a movie in America and a movie in Europe, but the music would be different because there were different cultural practices. Even inside of the United States, there were different cultural practices. The notion of pairing film and music had a number of antecedents among the 19th century stage melodrama. So this is talking about Greek plays had music, Baroque operas in the 17th century had music. So the idea of music accompanying a play or something that people are watching is not a new thing. So it wasn't like, whoa, this is crazy, cool, let's do this forever. They had already been doing it. The conventional explanation, though, for use of music in silent film is actually purely functional. The music drowned out the noise of the projector and the talkative audiences. So if you can imagine watching a silent movie, you're just looking at pictures and the projector was just being super noisy, making those pictures, but also the people around you were talking. So in order to cut down on their noise and the projector noise affecting your experience, they added music to it so that it wasn't quite the only thing you were hearing. So film is, after all, a technological process producing larger-than-life, two-dimensional, largely black and white and silent images. So accepting them as real requires a leap of faith. Music with its melody, harmony, and instrumental color, not to mention the actual presence of live musicians, fleshes out those images, lending them credibility. So it's kind of like using more senses. So, we have five senses like seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and I'm forgetting one. Anyway, there's 5 of them. And so with silent movies, you were literally only seeing. And so music added a dimension of experience, which made it more credible. In the early periods of silent film, continuous musical accompaniment was not the normal practice. So the U.S. film industry began to standardize musical accompaniment between 1908 and 1912. silent movies started showing up around 1890. So this is like 15, 20 years after the invention of movies. So there was a lot of musical accompaniment that was going on during that time, but it wasn't standardized. So this is the same period that saw film solidification as a narrative form and the conversion of viewing spaces from small, cramped Nickelodeons to theatrical auditoriums. So a Nickelodeon is just like a little tiny movie theater. And somebody would just open it up, and it was really small, and it would only have like 10 or 15 people who would go in and watch the movie. As watching movies got to be more and more popular, the spaces that are used to watch movies got bigger and bigger. Attempts to encourage the use of film music and monitor its quality can also be traced back to this era. Theater owners became more discriminating in hiring and paying musicians, and audiences came to expect continuous musical accompaniment. So the more people were going, the higher quality of product that needed to be put on. So people who owned the movie theaters were like, man, we need good musicians. That's going to bring bigger audiences. So initially, an accompanist left to their own devices and untrained in their craft would improvise. So basically they would just be playing chords and making it up on the fly as they watched the movie and played. Therefore, the quality of musical accompaniment varied widely. You can just imagine somebody who's really good at the piano and has a lot of experience is going to be able to improvise better than a newer player. The single most important device in the standardization of film music was the cue sheet, which is a list of musical selections fitted to the individual film. The most sophisticated of them contained actual excerpts of music timed to fit each scene and cued to screen action to keep the accompanist on track. As early as 1909, Edison Studios circulated cue sheets for their films. So here is an example of a cue sheet. It's from Sunnyside. I have no idea what movie that is, but you can see there's timing sections and kind of like what the cue is. So Charlie Chaplin falls off a bridge. Then you need to play this. So what would literally happen is there would be a piano sitting in front of the screen, and the pianist would be sitting there and playing as he watched the movie. So he had to be able to do a lot of things all at once. Now, in Charlie Chaplin's movies, he usually composed his own music, so a bunch of this would come with the cue sheet. But many other movies didn't have a composer for the movie, so they would just put in like random music from music history and play it, which is kind of why we have some pieces of classical music from the 1600s that we still know, even if we don't know the name of it, because we've heard it because it's been used mostly in movies and TV. So musical encyclopedias soon appeared, containing vast inventories of music, largely culled from the classics of the 19th century Western European art music and supplemented by original compositions. So if you can imagine a textbook all about history, so there used to be a textbook with just like hundreds of musical pieces in it, and people would like learn them so that they could put them with the scenes in the movies. J.S. Zamechnik composed the Sam Fox Moving Picture Music series, and this is a picture of the Moving Picture Music series. So this one includes not only a generic hurry music, but hurry music for struggles, hurry music for duels, and hurry music for mob and fire scenes. Even treachery was customized for villains, ruffians, smugglers, or conspirators. So you can see some of these on here. There's the hurry music for strugglers, hurry music for duels, a storm scene, fairy music. They had a generic piece of music to play behind a generic scene type. And so people could buy this for 50 cents, which seems really cheap to me, but once again, this was in like 1910, which is a long time ago. So there's plenty of music to choose from. Popular music of the day was also featured in silent film. Ragtime music and popular jazz were often added to silent film cue sheets. By the teens, however, silent film accompaniment had developed into a profession, and the piano emerged as the workhorse of the era. So this is a picture of people watching a movie. So here's the silent movie, and here's the piano player, and look how much music she has just like sitting up there. That's crazy. And she had to be able to see the screen so she could stay with the cue sheet. The first American orchestral score, generally acknowledged as The Birth of a Nation in 1915, was a compilation by Joseph Carl Brel and the film's director D.W. Griffith, rating such classics as Richard Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries and Edvard Grieg's In the Hall of the Mountain King. Wagnerian opera and Wagner's theory of the Gestaltgeschichte work, total artwork, were early influences on accompanists. Especially influential was Wagner's use of leitmotif in an identifying musical passage, often a melody associated through repetition with a particular character, place, emotion, or even abstract idea. So this is going to be really important for you to know what leitmotif is, because we're going to talk about that some more in the coming days. Silent film accompanists often use the leitmotif to unify musical accompaniment, and during the period of film's transformation into narrative form, leitmotifs became an important device for clarifying the story and helping audiences keep track of characters.